Good day, everyone. This is Bob Roswick with the Bismarck Air Museum, and with me today is Tom Trousdale, our docent, to talk about DC-3s. In the last episode of The Docent and the Doctor, we were discussing DC-3s, and now we want to pick up on some of their historical significance. And what do we have a picture of here, Tom?
This is Tempelhof Aerodrome in the German Republic. It was the main airport that was used for Berlin, and these are all DC-3s that were lined up in and during the Berlin airlift, and they are unloading and loading supplies. And believe it or not, most DC-3s made at least 3 or 4 trips to Tempelhof every day, hauling supplies, everything from coal to foodstuffs to keep the Germans occupied when the Russians blockaded Berlin.
It's an amazing picture that just tells us again the historical significance of this.
It really does.
And I just brought up some pictures of a couple of variants, and I think that this is an impressive variant. I've actually saw this airplane at Oshkosh and snapped a picture of it. And there's your DC-3 on straight floats, or on amphibious floats. The other picture I brought is what is popular in today's world is the DC-3s get converted to turboprops. And this is, Tom, you can explain.
This is the Conroy Tri-3. It was developed by Philip Conroy, who actually developed the DC-3 with turboprop engines, Rolls-Royce Darts. And then also down the road, we'll be talking probably about a Boeing 377, the Stratocruiser, and he took the Stratocruiser and converted it into an airplane which he's much more famous for than the Tri-DC-3, called the Pregnant Guppy, which hauled the rockets around and so on.
I was in the Pregnant Guppy this past year, and it's amazing, clean gymnasium on the inside.
Yeah, it's an interesting airplane. You bet it is.
Here's a picture of a cockpit of a DC-3. It just shows you the layout, pretty straightforward. Most of the interior cockpits are the same. One thing I look for in these pictures if they have any modern instrumentation, and this one really does not. Some of the other photos we show often have modern radios and a GPS slipped into a corner.
Is that yellow? Is that a radar by any chance?
That is a radar.
Yeah, I thought that's a radar. That's about the only modern thing that I see there, too.
And if you look at the previous picture, the radome is underneath the aircraft.
Underneath,
right here.
Yep.
Yeah. And let's get back to Bismarck. What are we looking at here, Tom?
Here we're looking at an early picture of the Bismarck Airport with a Red River cart comparing the transportation in the early days of North Dakota to the city of Bismarck, which again is our DC-3 that happens to be parked in the background. The interesting thing that I notice is the only concrete there is right in front of the airport. The rest of it is typical North Dakota, which is prairie sage and prairie grass.
The one thing I find interesting in this picture is Bismarck had 2 airports before its present location. One was on the strip across from what was, for a long time when I was young, called Jerry's Supper Club, and they hauled mail in and out there. And then it moved to South Washington Street, basically south of the Bismarck ballpark. But this airplane was developed in 1936, and between 1920 and 1940, the airport moved out to the present location. So this airplane is at the present location of the Bismarck Airport.
Mid-Continent Airlines was an airline that in 1952 merged with Braniff. Mid-Continent flew up to Minot and flew down to Kansas City, and they landed at Aberdeen, and at Aberdeen they made connections with a Mid-Continent DC-3 to go to Minneapolis, St. Paul. The only thing that is interesting, and it's hard to see, but let's talk about the Mid-Continent insignia there, which is hard to see, but it's an Indian aiming an arrow, a bow and arrow, and their pilot wings are probably some of the classiest that you will ever see. The Indian is in color, and it's a sharp set of pilot wings, and of course very, very rare because Mid-Continent disappeared in 1952.
Another picture of a Mid-Continent airplane. Looks like a DC-3 being loaded, and I think we got the sheriff on board today. This is an interesting picture that we pulled up. We actually got 3 sources of this photo, and basically in Bismarck, sometimes celebrities came on these airplanes. Tom, this is your standard DC-3?
This is a standard DC-3. It's probably a cousin to the city of Bismarck. It is in the late 30s, early 40s paint scheme. You'll notice before the red tail, and the basic paint scheme of this was blue stripe and blue trim on the tail and on the ailerons, and then the Northwest insignia in red and white.
This picture is from the tower, and it shows our celebrities are in this middle point. And what's interesting is we have our photographer here, and I'll just carry these pictures forward. Let's see who came to town. And what we have is Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor came to Bismarck and stopped off while they fueled. And this is again Northwest Airlines, not Mid-Continent. Barbara Stanwyck was a famous actress of the day, starring with Fred MacMurray, Burt Lancaster, Gary Cooper, and was famous for the TV show The Big Valley. And here again are the celebrities as they get ready to depart on their pit stop to Bismarck.
You'll notice she's wearing a mink, and everybody else seems to be dressed like it's probably summer or early spring, so a little bit of Hollywood class there with the mink.
One thing I think that's interesting is that when we think about airlines today, our airlines generally fly east and west, and back in the day we had north-south routes that went down into Texas.
We had north-south routes that went down into Texas and Omaha and Kansas City, you bet. And Mid-Continent was one of the early carriers that did that. They started with Lockheed Lodestars in the early or the late 30s, and that was about an 18-passenger airplane.
Here's a unique application for a DC-3, and what are we seeing here, Tom?
We're seeing the largest weather vane, and it actually works. It's at Whitehorse in the Yukon. It's an old Canadian Pacific DC-3, and it is so sensitive. If you have a 5-mile-an-hour wind on it, it will turn in the direction of the wind. It's a very unique and very historic aircraft, and also a very historic wind vane that is used up there. Still used to this day, by the way.
The other thing I'll just point out is a lot of the conversions that come through Basler and that have the turboprops end up in Whitehorse because they fly those in the Arctic into the unimproved strips.
This is Doogie, the DC-3 that came, well, it's still in Fargo. And it's the Smile in the Sky. It's a bright yellow DC-3, a beautiful aircraft parked right out at the Bismarck Aero Center. And incidentally, the Aero Center is the hangar that we hope to convert into the Bismarck Air Museum.
Bismarck Air Museum Foundation is trying to capture and restore the large round-top hangar at the Bismarck Airport, known as Hangar Number 5, and you can actually see the little 5 insignia on the side here. Log on to our website at bismarckairmuseum.org and give us a donation and have a look at what we're up to. Also ask people to subscribe to this YouTube site so you can get future productions from us. I'd also like to credit Wikipedia for our photos. We also receive photos from the Bismarck Airport. Once again, I'd like to thank you, Tom, for helping us understand these iconic photos.
Bob, glad to do it, and it's a nice way to kill an afternoon.
Thanks, Tom.